Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Another video on the STI today, and we're going to be talking about the RCE yellow lowering springs. As you can see, the springs are already installed on the car. I was really hoping to include the installation process, you know, a step-by-step as I typically do in my videos, but unfortunately I lost a lot of the footage, and I just don't have enough of the pieces to put the video together. So as the title of the video suggests, I'm going to provide installation tips and basically cover what are some of those things you want to really pay attention to or know before you take on a job like this. If you want to know how to actually remove the strut assembly and change the springs and all that, feel free to check out my videos on the E30 suspension where I cover the basics. There's also other videos on YouTube where they cover the RCE yellow specifically on the WRX and the STI, so you can check those out. And I'm also going to be covering a quick review on what the springs feel like and how the car is handling now with the springs installed. So let me show you a closer look here at the spring already installed. As you can see here, I also have the Bilstein shocks that come with the Series Gray. They're yellow too, so perfect combination. And you can see the rear is installed right here. Alright, so first piece of advice, consider taking the car to a reputable shop to get this job done. If you don't necessarily enjoy working on cars, or have the experience, or don't care to learn, or just don't have the time, you know, a reputable shop can do this in about 2 hours for not that much money, and you'll just be done with it. Contrary to what you may have seen in some YouTube videos where people show a couple of steps in 5 minutes, suspension work is not necessarily fun, and it can be flat out dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Just take that into consideration. Now, if you do decide that you want to do this yourself, then by all means have at it. Just make sure you follow instructions, watch YouTube videos like this, and know what you're doing before you get into it. The Racecomp Engineering team does include easy to follow step-by-step instructions. These come in the box on paper form. You can also download a PDF from their website. Alright, so second piece of advice, get the right tools for the job, as I always like to say. And the instructions do list everything that you're going to need. For the most part, these are just standard metric wrenches and ratchets. You will need, however, some special tools as well. When you're going to be removing the top nut from the struts in order to take everything apart and remove the spring, you're going to need something like this, either an open socket that allows you to put an Allen wrench here while you turn and loosen the nut, or you can get, even better, a set of open sockets. I got this one from Harbor Freight for about $20 and it worked very well. Of course, you're also going to need a torque wrench. You're going to want to put everything back together and torque to spec. Again, these are suspension components. You don't want to play with that. And I almost forgot, you obviously need a spring compressor to get this job done safely, and remove the original springs as well as compress the new ones to put them in. Alright, so let me take you through some of the steps where I think I would have liked additional hints as I was doing this, and hopefully it'll help you with the install. So one of the first steps is going to be for you to remove the bolts here from the front strut assemblies, and you'll notice that one on the top here is a camber bolt. That means this can be used for adjusting camber, of course, and for alignment purposes. So you're going to want to mark the bolt. As you see here, I've used a Sharpie and marked several spots so that when you do put everything back together, you can try and leave everything as close to or exactly where it was. And that way you don't mess up your alignment too much for when you do need to drive the car to get it aligned. So on to the STI specific instructions, which is my case, of course. Starting with step number 8, it does ask you to basically take the damper apart so that you can remove the bump stop and cut a piece of it, so modify it and put everything back together. I have the Bilstein shocks on my car and I was not about to do that. I did contact RCE to see if they had experience with that particular damper before, and they didn't really have an answer for me, but I decided to skip that step completely, and I can tell you I have absolutely no issues. There was no need for me to modify the bump stop on the front shocks. That may be necessary for the standard OEM dampers, or not. If you're having a hard time taking the damper apart, you may just want to skip that altogether. If you have done this in either fashion on the other stocks, please leave your comments below and tell us how it went. So moving on to step 14, and this applies to both WRX and the STI model. And I think this is the most important step out of all of them. In fact, RCE has now included a note here to stress that you really have to make sure that your top perch is aligned with the rest of the strut assembly when you're putting this back together. If you are misaligned by just the slightest bit, you will risk having the spring rotate in some way where it's gonna start causing, you know, a clunking noise. And if you read on the forums and everybody that has done the installation who has complaints, I would say 9 out of 10 times the complaints are about noises, etc. And the answer is always the same. You get everything aligned and in place when you install this. So just make sure you do that. I used a yardstick for that and took my time and made sure that I was torquing everything down with my hand and maintaining the top perch aligned as I was tightening back that top nut to make sure everything was right in place before I installed it back on the car. Now moving on to the rears, the first thing they have you do is remove some bolts from the lower control arm that attach to the sway bar and the actual chuck itself. I found it was impossible to remove the chuck by just removing these 2 bolts. So I ended up removing this bolt here so that I could take the control arm further down. Need to remove this one here too. Oh, beautiful. Last but not least, you do want to make sure that you torque everything back to spec, of course, once you put everything in. My piece of advice with that is that when you have the assemblies out of the car, especially on the fronts, again, you got everything aligned, you use your special socket or your open socket set for that and torque down everything by hand as much as you can. You're not going to be able to put the 41 foot-pounds with your hands anyways, most likely, while getting everything aligned. So just get it as tight as you can, put the assembly back on the car, and then finish torquing while mounted on the car. That'll basically make it easier for you to get the 41 foot-pounds of torque that you need and not risk misaligning the top perch as you're tightening down the nuts. Do that for the fronts, of course. The rears, there's no alignment, but I would also recommend you finish up the torque while they're on the car. And once you have the springs installed, of course, and the car is now lowered about 20 millimeters all around, you will affect suspension geometry, so you're gonna wanna have the car professionally aligned. What I would recommend is that you do drive a couple 100 miles with the springs so that you let them settle before you take it to an alignment. You know, driving a couple 100 miles is not gonna eat your tires or anything like that, but that's not a step you want to skip for sure. So let me show you what the car looks now with the RCE yellows installed. I'm very happy with the drop, which is about an inch all around, or 0.8 inches, 20 millimeters, but it's a lot more noticeable than I expected. Even my wife asked me if the car was lowered as she walked by it. She knew I was working on the car. She didn't know what I was doing. So it's definitely noticeable. And we got about maybe at 1.5 fingers of space here, or wheel gap. I can't fit 2 fingers for sure, so maybe a finger and a little bit more out on the fronts. Let me show you what the other side looks like. And there you go. Now if we look at the rears, we have about a finger worth of wheel gap here, or maybe even less. Definitely not 2 fingers, or not even 1.5 fingers. So it is a little bit lower in the rear, but that is because the rear fenders are lower in the car. So I don't think it's the spring or anything like that. It's just the actual body of the car.
So I'm very happy with how this came out. It looks even, you know, rear and fronts, and the drop is just exactly what I was hoping to get. Now, of course, the real test is how the car is going to handle and how the suspension is going to feel. I did take a bit of a test drive already just to make sure that there were no clunky noises or anything wrong with the install, and everything seemed okay. But I still need to drive a little bit more and, you know, get on the highway and see really how it performs. Alright, so let's discuss what these RCE yellow springs feel like on the car. And I'll start off by saying that I was very happy with the factory suspension setup. To me, it was the perfect combination of, you know, sporty feel and ride quality for a daily driver. Now, the main reason I got the lowering springs was for aesthetics. I was looking to lower the car, reduce the wheel gap. Pretty much what most of you or anybody out there considering a set of lowering springs is going for on a car like this. Let's be honest here. If you're after performance and you're gonna take the car to autocross events or track and you're looking to shave off a couple of seconds, you're probably gonna be looking into a more serious coilover performance setup. Now, in terms of handling, the car does perform a bit better with the springs. There's less body roll, it does feel a bit more planted, and you know, it's more fun to take a corner, if you will, as you probably heard from other reviews. But more importantly, I was very concerned with what the impact would be to ride quality. I didn't really want to have something that was unbearable to drive on my daily commute. And what I can say, and I'm very happy to say this, is that there is not much difference between the factory setup and the RCE yellow springs in terms of ride comfort and quality. I have not been in situations where I feel like the suspension is crashing or that I bottom out or anything like that to be of concern. Although I do feel the road a little bit more, and you know, bumps feel a fraction more harsh than before. So yes, you can tell that I'm running springs, but nothing major. In fact, whatever little difference there was, I almost forgot about it with, you know, the time I've had the springs on. I just got used to it. And right now I'm actually going in this elevated highway section. If you can tell from the camera and the car movement, there's dips in every one of these sections. So this is a good test for the suspension and sort of, you know, as bad as it gets in my commute. And as you can see, you know, it's really not bad at all. So take that for what it's worth. So overall, I'm very happy with the results so far, and even happier that I didn't have to spend thousands of dollars on a coilover setup. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please leave your comments below and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. I will see you all in the next one.